Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have 2 hours of stories. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's see if we can reach 500 likes on this one. Of course, only drop a like if you feel that this video genuinely deserves it. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated, as I post content just like this all of the time. I'm always doing my best to make sure that I am posting stories that you will all enjoy. So hopefully you do. Sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, tell somebody you love them, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. I hadn't seen my father in years. It had been 2 decades since I had set eyes on the man. My last clear memory of him was the one of him walking out the door when I was 5 years old. I had been watching cartoons. I turned just in time to see my dad's back as he walked out the door, wearing his standard blue jean jacket, with his head down as the door slammed behind him. My mother was on the floor, sitting cross-legged and crying a few feet away from me. The sight shocked me. My mom never cried. She was my rock, and I had never ever seen even as much as a tear from her. I crawled over to her and sat in her lap while she sobbed, completely at a loss of what to do. I remember I stroked her hair to comfort her, something she had done countless times for me when I was sick or upset. "Where's Dad going?" I asked innocently. My mom looked at her, her eyes red and puffy from the crying. "Your daddy is gone, sweetie. Your daddy left us," she mumbled. The divorce had to be done in absentia. No one knew where he had gone. I remember walking around town with my grandmother putting up missing posters for my father. She could never accept that he had simply walked away from all of us. The posters stayed up for a few months before they all got torn down. Years passed. Mom remarried a great guy. I got therapy to deal with my dad leaving and eventually went off to college. Life was normal, though I never stopped thinking about my dad. Not really. Even when I thought I came to terms with it, I'd get the urge to Google his name and search for him on social media, but nothing ever turned up. That's why when he finally did message me, it came as a complete surprise. I was at work, messing around on my phone while I had reports to write when it popped up on my screen. "Is this David Lewis from Topeka? And your mom's name is Penelope? If so, then this is your father. I have been trying to get in contact with you." I sat and stared at the message in disbelief. I set the phone down, then picked it up again and read the message. While I was processing everything, more messages appeared. "David, I'm sorry for everything. For these years I stayed away. I really need you to answer me. I need you to agree to come meet with me." My first instinct wasn't to reply. I was half convinced that this was some kind of scam. Someone knew about my past and they were going to ask for a Venmo or money transfer. I finally replied. How do I know this is really my father and not some kind of scam? I waited for a reply. My heart was pounding, and a rush of thoughts were going through my head. If this was really my dad, I had a lot of things to say to him. Most of them weren't good. "I promise you I'm your dad. When you were a kid, you had a ginger cat named Polka that died when you were 3. You had a stuffed teddy bear you slept with every night whose name was Mr. Simon. Please, David, this is really me, and I need you to agree to meet with me." I stared at my phone. I was racking my brain, trying to think of what to say. Tell him off. Tell him I'd gladly meet him because I had missed him all these years? I did neither. "I need some time to process this. Let me write you back later this evening. I'm at work and I need to focus." Holding the phone, I waited for his reply. It came quickly. "I understand, but please, I need an answer by tonight." Going back to my desk to work on the reports was almost surreal. It was like I was a ghost in my own body. I did get everything done, though. It gave me something to focus on. Once I was home, I went straight to the bedroom and flopped on the bed, phone in hand. My fiancée wasn't home yet. Today was her late day at work. Of all the people I wanted to talk to the most, it was her. But she wouldn't be able to answer even if I did call. I read over the messages again. Honestly, I didn't have to reply at all. I could block him, let him sit around and wonder what he did wrong to make me abandon him. But I did finally message back. The curiosity was too much. Why do you even want to meet with me? If there's anything you want to say to me, just type it out. His reply was almost immediate. David, I'm so glad you wrote back. I was afraid I had lost you. Trust me, I need to see you in person. If you never want to see or speak to me after that, I promise I'll never reach out to you again. I lay the phone down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. This was just too surreal for me. The front door opened and Alicia walked in. I'm home, she called out. She walked into the bedroom, and when she couldn't find me in the living room, she looked down at me and furrowed her brow. Are you okay? Did something happen? She asked, concerned. I shook my head and held up my phone. My dad just messaged me. He wants to meet me tonight to talk in person. I don't know if I should agree to go or not. I explained, holding out the phone to her so she could read what he wrote herself. Her eyes went wide. Of all the things I could have told her, this didn't seem to be the one that she expected. She took the phone and read over the messages. What do you want to do, babe? I know he's your dad, but he's essentially a stranger. You don't owe him anything. You still don't have to meet with him. Alicia reassured me, holding my hand. I think I want to meet him, even if it's just to find out why he left. I want to hear it from him, I said, squeezing her hand back. I turned back to the phone and typed out the message. Where do you want to meet? Send me the address. His response. Thank you so much, David. This means everything to me. I'm sending the address now. I was only mildly surprised when the address he sent me was only 30 minutes from our apartment. I looked it up on Google Maps and it showed a tiny cabin out in the woods. I felt a stab of anger from knowing he was this close to me and was only now reaching out to me. How long had he lived there? Years? Months? I would find out soon enough. Alicia insisted on coming with me, but I convinced her to stay at home. She had the address where I would be, and if she didn't hear from me in 2 hours, she would call me. And if she didn't hear from me, she'd call the cops. She wasn't convinced yet that this wasn't some elaborate scam. I had plenty of time to think on the drive out to my dad's place. When I arrived, I felt a pang of anger at the house. It was a lovely little log cabin. I knew enough about the area to know it wasn't cheap, and I wondered what he had been doing all this time to afford such a nice place. Not paying child support, that was for sure. The car had barely come to halt before the door opened, and a man opened the door and awkwardly walked up to the driver window. David, the man said, breathless, a small smile on his face. It was my dad. Now that he was here in the flesh, it didn't feel real at all. He looked haggard and thinner than his photo had let on. I stepped out of the car and backed away to let me out. The small smile on his face, everything I had planned to say to him vanished from my head as he gestured towards the house. Come on, let's get you inside. I have a lot to explain before it's time. He started moving to the cabin, not looking back to see if I was following. I followed. I stared at the back of his head, glaring. He hadn't tried to hug me or touch me in any way, for which I was glad, but I was also disappointed that he hadn't tried. The inside was nice, minimally but tastefully decorated. It had a woman's touch, as Alicia would like to say. Maybe he had a girlfriend or even a wife. Mom's remarried. His name is Steve. He's a great guy, I blurted out. My dad turned and looked at me. The smile fell from his face and his eyes dropped. I know. I saw that on social media. She looks happy, he said softly. I shrugged. I had said that to hurt him, but now all it did was make me feel a little guilty. Why did you ask me to come here after all this time? I just want you to know that if you are going to ask about getting a kidney or money from me, you can forget it. I snapped, my voice sharper than I had intended. I wanted to play it cool, collected, but I was too frazzled. He stared at me. His eyes were watery as if he was fighting back tears. He seemed at a loss for words. I shifted awkwardly on the couch, averting my eyes. I just needed to see you. I wanted to explain why I left. I'm not going to ask for forgiveness, but I do want you to understand why I did what I did, he said in a rush. I looked up at him. The obvious answer was that there had been another woman, or maybe some kind of debt to the mafia. Anything, really. But now that I was about to learn the reason, all I felt was a slow, simmering anger. No matter what excuse he gave me, it wouldn't be good enough. I'm a werewolf, he said simply, spreading his arms in a gesture of resignation. I had to admit that all the things I had thought he might say, this was not one of them. I see, I said slowly. He was mentally ill. Maybe he was schizophrenic, or some kind of mental break. Look, if you brought me all the way out here so you could spin some kind of fairy tale about why you left, save it. I can tell you're doing well for yourself. There's no need to lie to me. I gestured angrily around the cabin. His eyes followed my hands as I pointed to our surroundings, and a tiny smile formed on his lips. Oh, this isn't my house, David. The people who live here are on vacation and I broke in, but we needed a quiet place to talk, he explained, stepping closer. I stood up and sidestepped away, moving closer to the door. Are you serious? Do you have any idea how much trouble you'd be in if you were caught? You go to jail for stuff like that, I stammered. This wasn't going how I thought it would at all. I was wishing it was a scammer. It would have been less heartbreaking. He moved towards me. He lifted his shirt, and that's when I saw he had a gun holster on his belt with a small pistol housed in it. In a smooth motion, he lifted out the gun and held it out to me. I need you to do one thing for me. In all these years I've been away, I've done nothing but try to find a cure for this. To end it, to cure it. It doesn't matter. All I could find was this. The only thing that can truly stop me is silver. I have this thing loaded with silver bullets. It had to be done by someone who loves the afflicted. Otherwise, it won't work. Trust me, I've tried the alternatives. His eyes were dripping tears as he thrust the revolver into my hands. I stared at it, dumbfounded. Dad, this is insane. You're insane. You need to go to a hospital. I stared in shock at the gun. I'd never held one before. It must be done by someone who loves me. My parents are dead. I know your mom doesn't love me. It must be you. You're all I have. He gulped as he spoke. I held out the gun to him, but he stepped away and walked towards the door, blocking the exit. Look, we don't have much time. Once night falls, this will happen quickly, and you should know I don't have control over myself when the change comes. I've killed people without even remembering it. You won't be any different even if you are my son. He gulped again, the color draining from his face. I took a step back from him on reflex, clutching the gun to my chest protectively. I didn't want to give it up anymore. I didn't believe for a second that he was a werewolf, but giving him the gun seemed like a bad idea. It's time to go outside now. No reason to ruin this nice house, he huffed. His breath was coming faster like he had just run a mile. His face, already pale, was taking on an alarmingly waxy texture that was making my stomach turn. I had no idea if he was having a stroke, but he suddenly did not look good. He stumbled outside and I followed him, not knowing what to do. I glanced at my car. I could just run to it and leave, take the gun with me and call an ambulance for him. Don't even think of trying to make it to the car. You won't have time anyway. He looked up as the last rays of daylight vanished over the horizon. It's happening. Forgive me, David. Please know I always loved you. I hope you still love me. He rasped as he doubled over, seemingly in pain. Dad? I gasped, taking a few steps towards him. No, he screeched at me, holding his hands out and backing away, before he fell to the ground and started convulsing. It happened instantaneously. In the movies I'd watched about werewolves, the transformation is always drawn out, painful and dramatic. But this wasn't it. His skin split open like it wasn't even skin anymore. It parted like his flesh was made of papier-mâché. My vision blurred as I took everything in. The beast rising from the sheds of skin and clothing and looking at me. Its eyes were a vicious amber, glowing and filled with pure malevolence. There was nothing human in them. We stared at each other for a few seconds before it took a leap towards me, closing the distance between us in a split second. I shrieked and brought up my arm, the one with the gun. The creature was close enough for me to touch. I could smell the wet animal smell of its fur as it reached out towards me. I fired the gun on instinct. I fired twice, one bullet hitting the thing in its cheek, and the second in the chest where the heart should be. The beast let out an almost dainty and human-sounding gasp as it collapsed sideways. It looked surprised as it hit the dirt. I dropped the gun, my fingers numb from shock, and I ran to my car. I started the car and peeled out of the driveway. The headlights briefly illuminated the thing's body as I drove away. It hadn't moved. The shock hit me as I was driving, and I struggled to keep myself on the road. I kept looking in the rear-view mirror, expecting to see that thing chasing me down, but there was only darkness behind me. I didn't call the cops, or an ambulance. I cried silently the whole way home. There was nothing I could tell anyone that would make any sense to anyone. Alicia had waited up for me, and when I burst in the front door, she gasped and asked me what had happened. I couldn't tell her the truth. I made up a lie on the spot, that I had met my dad and he was a drug addict asking for money, that the cabin wasn't even his but a place he had broken into. I had to talk her out of calling the cops. There was no way I could ever explain why there was a dead lycanthrope in the driveway. She stayed up with me until exhaustion finally took over, and she passed out on the couch. I stayed awake, though. There was no way I could sleep. I sat in the dark, sipping coffee and shaking. When the first rays of light peeked through the blinds, I let out a sigh of relief. The sunlight brought sanity with it, and I could start trying to convince myself that I had hallucinated this whole night. That's when my phone buzzed, and I reflexively looked at the message that popped up on my screen, and my heart dropped. It was just a single sentence. David? It didn't work. Not the first time my vices have gotten me into a bad situation. If we're being honest, it's probably not the last either. I have a lot of bad habits that get me in trouble more often than not, but my worst is definitely gambling. I can't help it. I just get in the zone. When I feel like I'm in the zone, I can't stop winning. I get the fever. Then as soon as I'm on top of the world, everything crashes down and I lose it all again. You would think I've learned my lesson by now, but it's the thrill of the chase, I guess. It started out innocently enough, with bets on high school football games and stuff like that on the local level. Don't judge me. Then it just wasn't enough. I needed to keep going, even when I lost it all time after time. First, the car was repoed, then my home when my mortgage was too far gone, even when I finally made enough money to pay off the entire balance. I just kept thinking, I can make more. Guess that explains the problem with billionaires. Some people are never satisfied, even after 8 figures. Now, though, my debt is out of control. I'm talking over $1 million, more than any human could hope to pay back in a lifetime, even with a miracle. The people I owed weren't super accommodating either, sending people to watch me at all hours of the day, letting me know to count the hours and dollars before they sure as hell were. Didn't even have a choice when they finally decided I had gone long enough without paying. I was paranoid at this point, checking out my blinds, keeping all the lights off at my little motel I was staying in week to week. I even had the people at the motel keeping an eye out for me, giving them a call to make sure nobody was waiting around the other side of the lobby where I couldn't see. Thinking back, the poor clerk sounded really nervous when I made the last call, likely being threatened by the guys that came for me to tell me the coast was clear. I was barely 3 feet out the door when someone grabbed me, throwing a bag over my head like they were in a mafia movie. Before I knew what was happening, I was shoved in the back of a car and driven for probably 3 hours. Honestly, I lost track of time. As much as I babbled and tried to plead with the guys who had me, they wouldn't say a word except, "Shut up." When they finally pulled me out of the car, taking me into a hot, dank building that smelled of mildew, they still hadn't taken the bag off yet. All I was told was to stand in one spot and hold my hand out. That freaked me out, thinking they were going to do like some old-timey stuff where they cut off my hand for stealing their money or something. After a moment, I could hear other people too. Some sniffling, a couple outright sobbing but muffled by their own bags over their faces. There was no common thread between any of the voices, but all were begging to be let go. A voice crackled to life over an old speaker above, coming in sharp and loud, hurting my ears. "Hello, everybody. It's so nice that you all could join us today, especially since you've been making efforts to avoid us for so long." Whoever it was, they're way too cheerful about what they're about to do. Now, all of you owe some of us a lot of money, so much that you'll never pay it back, even if you get to our level. We don't like it when people fall behind on their bills, so we'll help you out a little. Bags off. A snap came over the speaker and suddenly bright fluorescents were blinding me. It was like a migraine hitting, the huge lights above us making everything else fade, too bright to focus. As my eyes finally adjusted, I could see 4 other people gathered around me, each with their own little personal guard now holding the bag. We were arranged in a circle, all aligning with a point of the pentagram drawn on the floor in front of us. "We're going to lock you in here overnight and watch what happens. If you survive, your debts are cleared. If you die, well, we're doing our own little gambling on that," the voice said again, glee ringing behind it. Things were coming into focus a little more, my pupils finally finding the right dilation to handle all the harsh light. The pentagram we were standing upon was more clear, not drawn onto the smooth pavement below but etched in, deep, fine lines interconnecting through the circle. Rusty red stains were abundant over the entire circle, and I felt like puking when I realized what it probably was. "Gentlemen, proceed." Each of our guards stepped forward, raising ancient-looking daggers and grabbing our left hands. I drew in a sharp breath, feeling the blade slice across my skin, making a diagonal slice over my forearm that started oozing blood immediately. A woman nearby screamed. The man on my right began cursing at the guard holding him, while the other two were in the same shocked silence I was. I still hadn't come around to exactly what was happening, much less that I was being sliced open over a pentagram in the middle of a warehouse. It felt like I woke up in a low-budget horror movie, like a nightmare or one of those crazy interactive haunted houses. My breath started to catch as the blood and pain made everything become suddenly real. The panic attack was setting in. "We consecrate this domain to you, our great Lord, and everything you have given us." The voice cackled over the speaker again. Now that I was unmasked, I could see the old crates and pallets set up in the warehouse corners. Everything else was barren, just plain white walls, smooth concrete, and steel beams holding up the roof. Large fluorescent bars were hanging from the rafters above, making the reflections of the smooth concrete sway as something moved them. "For you, we bring this meal, a pittance for the bounty you have given us. Please, enjoy as you see fit." The speakers crackled out again. After each of us had spilled a satisfactory amount of blood, the guards each put their blades on the floor, pulling a roll of gauze from their suit pockets. They field-dressed our wounds, leaving the daggers where they lay in front of each of us before filling out the only door. I could hear chairs being drawn over the door as it was sealed from the outside. There was no getting out, for any of us. "Now, each of you has a dagger to defend yourself or improve your odds. If you look to either side of the building, there's a window to see the current time. Survive until daylight, and you'll be free to go. Good luck." The voice trailed off with a laugh, leaving each of us to sit in silence, all dealing with our own personal panic attacks. "Who are y'all?" The man to my right, the same one who had been swearing, was now looking at all of us in turn. "Why are we here? Who is doing this?" He was losing it, obviously already on edge before any of this went down. Even worse, it looked like he was having some wicked withdrawals from some sort of drug. Veins were popping on his bald head, eyes bloodshot, and face almost just as red, as he picked up the dagger in front of him, brandishing it at all of us. We fell back in fear. I managed to grab the dagger in front of me before sliding back, desperately pushing myself across the smooth floor to get away. "What? Did Tony put you all up to this? He trying to scare me because I haven't paid him yet?" He was waving the knife around like a madman, threatening all of us one by one. As the rest of us backed away, he stepped into the pentagram, moving towards us, still waving the knife. It was only moments after he stepped on it, though I'm still not sure of what I saw, and he was gone. As he was walking towards us over the pentagram, a massive amount of blood started bubbling out of the etchings. It came up slow at first, just seeping through the fine lines, covering the floor around. As it filled the entire pentagram, scarlet lines growing in the bright lights, every angle made by an intersecting line on the pentagram, suddenly shot forward, right into the center where he was standing. Dozens of liquid strands, no thicker than a fishing wire, pierced through him, extending right through and crossing as they impaled him. He dropped his knife, words catching in his throat now as his lungs were punctured. Some of the filaments were through his neck, and one I saw come right out of his left eye. For only a moment he was paralyzed there before hands began reaching from the circle below, clawing at his legs. He couldn't make a sound as they dragged him down into the pooling blood. Through solid concrete, hands coming up in waves to grab and push him under. Only moments passed and he was gone, along with all the overflowing blood that never went outside the circle. There was no trace he had ever been there, save the knife still lying on the ground, covered in scarlet blood. Oh my God. A woman, wiry frame and dark bags under her eyes, whispered under her breath. Murmurs arose from everyone, all of us wondering what we had just seen. Through the window, we could see the last rays of light beginning to leave the sky, the last sunset any of us may ever see. We need to get out of here. Another woman stepped forward, tall, dark hair, and piercing gray eyes. She ran for the door, slamming into it hard enough to knock the breath out of her. Despite the force, chains rattling on the other side made no sign of giving. We ain't going anywhere. A man who looked like a starving rat said from nearby. He was definitely in the same boat as the guy who just died, going through major withdrawals from something. They won't let any of us go. Then we'll make them, Gray Eyes said again. She was still beating at the door, though I'm sure she knew it was pointless. You hear me? You better let us out of here. A scream ripped through the air, full of dread, anger, and sorrow like I'd never heard. I was looking at the three others, none of whom were making the sound. It maintained for almost 30 seconds, all of us freezing in response. My blood was running cold, every hair standing on end. It finally stopped, cut off suddenly like they had been forcefully quieted. What was that? Ratman said, nervously looking around. Nobody said anything, all realizing that we only had limited time. God, I'm going to die. So, anyone want to try killing someone again? Gray Eyes asked, looking at each of us in turn. We need to get out. I don't know how you plan on doing that, Ratman replied with a snort. That door is chained, unless you have some bolt cutters. What about the windows? I said, pointing up to the now dark squares near the ceiling. Night had fallen, leaving the bright lights of the warehouse to reflect off the windows, shrouding anything that may be outside. Maybe one of these knives could break it. Worth a try, Beggs replied. She looked like she would fall asleep at any moment, but her eyes were still wide with fear, darting around everywhere. It's useless, Ratman said, staring at me. They'll kill you even if you get out. Well, better than whatever that was, I replied, heading over to the crates in one corner. Someone help me stack these. The wooden crates must have been old, but when I got closer I could notice dark red stains on the rugged wood. There was a rotten smell around them, like meat left out in the hot sun for too long. Good God, that stinks. Gray Eyes was next to me now, covering her nose. Hope it's not what I think. It is, Ratman chimed in, walking over from where he was previously cowering on the floor. Okay, who are you? You seem to have an answer to everything here, so spill the beans for the rest of us. Beggs was looking towards Ratman now, gripping the knife at her side. These guys that brought us in here were some former associates, he said, grumbling. Beggs clocked him right there. Don't even think he knew what was happening until he was already on the ground. Knew I recognized you, she said, spitting on him. Whoa, hey, let's calm down a little, I said, putting my hands up, standing between them and looking at Beggs. What's the deal here? He's the guy that killed my husband, she said, still gripping the knife in her other hand. I've killed a few people, but he ain't one of 'em. Ratman was grumbling again. Not my fault he was a tweaker. It's your fault there was fentanyl in it. You killed him. He was sober for 10 years and you pieces of crap killed him. Beggs was shouting more, now waving the knife. I knew there wasn't going to be any stopping her, so I stepped back. Gray Eyes stood beside me, the stench of the boxes forgotten as we watched the situation unfold. Don't kill him, Gray Eyes shouted, trying to get Beg's attention. The woman was still raving, though, waving the knife more erratically than before. Not yet. We need answers. I don't have any, Ratman spat back. I only put people in crates. I never saw this before. So what was that? I asked, pointing over to the pentagram. Beats me. Like I said, I only put people in crates, he said, shrugging again. Why? Gray Eyes was staring through his soul at this point, glaring in his direction. Ratman was cowering again, curled up on the floor with his hands up towards Beg's, no longer ranting but still holding the knife toward him, point out and gripped in both hands. I just did my job, okay? He spat back, fear in his voice. I got my orders on who to off, and I did my job. Jeremy Prim, Gray Eyes said, glare intensifying. 1 year since I've seen my brother. Was he one of them? Probably. I don't remember every guy I've put. Ratman was cut off by Gray Eyes, who was now pulling him up from the ground with one hand, while stabbing with her knife in the other. You, she was shouting. Suddenly she stopped, halting the knife before she brought it down again. Instead, she got up. Ratman, still breathing raggedly on the ground, and started dragging him. Please, no, I'm sorry. He was barely able to get the words out. Probably had one of his lungs punctured when she was going at it. It didn't matter, though. She threw him right into the pentagram, rage making her even stronger somehow. Please, don't kill me. I don't want to die. I don't care, she said, walking away from the etchings on the floor. They began to glow once more, just like when the first guy was taken. Ratman was crying in the center as another noise began, this one a low rumble. It grew steadily, becoming a roar in seconds. A massive, beastly mouth burst from the pentagram, sharp teeth and huge jaws devouring him in one bite, severing a leg in the process. The circle went dark again, leaving only the severed leg to bleed on the floor. Gray Eyes looked at me next as she returned. You part of this too? All I could do was raise my hands and shake my head, still in shock from what I had just seen. Just a dude with a gambling problem. Gray Eyes fell to the ground, sobbing. Beggs moved over to her, in much the same state, but still trying to offer comfort. It only took her a minute, but Gray Eyes pulled herself together, coming off the floor and walking towards the crates again. I'm getting out of here. We're getting the cops, and these guys are going to get dragged to the death penalty if I have to do it myself, she said, pulling one crate out from the edge of the pile before they started stacking up. It scraped across the cement, making an awful sound, but she kept pulling until she could get behind it, shoving it bit by bit toward the window. You gonna help? Guess so, I said, going toward the pile myself. The crate I pulled was heavy, and when I pushed it, I could feel something almost sloshing around, making the awful smell come in stronger waves. All I could do was try not to throw up as I kept shoving it further toward Gray Eye's crate, now positioned under the window. As I got further, she squatted on the other side of the crate, giving me a count of 3 before both of us heaved it up, sliding it fully on top of the other one. From the looks of it, we would need about 3 more, at least. Think that'll work? We'll make it work, Gray Eyes answered. Beggs was now moving a crate of her own, and both of us helped to lift and stack it. There are pallets too. They'll be easier. As they continued moving boxes, I started collecting pallets, bringing them closer so we could start making steps to get up. Even after what seemed like ages, we had barely made progress, needing to take breaks as all of us were wheezing in exhaustion. We realized pretty quickly we would need to make a stair pattern to get to the top, and pulling that off took a ton of work, I finally asked to tap for a break, both women nodding in agreement. My smoker lungs couldn't take this. Knock, knock, knock. 3 knocks, each in a quick succession, rang out, making all of us freeze. It sounded like someone jumping on the metal roof, making thunderous booms that I could feel resonate through. Then they came faster, always in quick bursts of 3, but now from almost every direction. The walls, the ceiling, the chains rattling as the doors were hit. I couldn't tell if it was knocking to get in or out, but I knew I would rather be out of here. All at once the knocking stopped, just as quickly as it began. The lights flickered, going out for a moment before flaring back on, making the migraine feel worse. We sat to take a breather after that, getting our bearings back together. Eventually, we got to it again, though we only got 1 trip in when everything went to hell. The window was maybe close enough to reach it with another pallet. Beggs and Gray Eyes were both pulling another crate, each toward the stack. Finally, it looked like we may have a chance to get out of there. As Beggs moved hers closer, pulling it right next to the already high steps, a hand reached from the crate, coming right through the solid wood, to grab her. "Help, please," she was screaming while the mottled, rotting hand was trying to pull her closer, bringing her into the putrid box. It had her by the left arm, yanking hard to get her closer. Another hand reached out to help it, clutching at the same arm. I ran up, desperately trying to pull the knife I had stuck into my belt loop. I stabbed the grabbing hands, desperately trying to hack them off her. They pulled her closer, but she tried bracing her arm against the box to keep from going in. It was a mistake. They pulled her in closer, more hands coming to bring her in faster. She went straight through the solid wood, her screams becoming muffled as she was pulled inside. I could hear the screams turn to wrenching as the putrescent contents of the box overwhelmed her. She disappeared into the crate completely, hands receding alongside her. Gray Eyes and I both looked at each other. Beg's shrieks were intercut with desperate gasps for air, muffled through the box's wood. "Oh God, please." "Use your knife," Gray Eyes shouted at me, pulling hers out and positioning it in the crack between planks on top. I got beside her, doing the same and pressing down with both blades. It took a minute, Beg screaming the entire time. Her retching sounds were disgusting, and the smell coming from inside was quickly creeping out as we got the lid loosened. Eventually, it finally gave way. Gray Eyes grabbing one side while I grabbed the other to lift it off. Beg's screaming became louder as it came up. The sight that met us made me turn to the side, puking any contents still left in my stomach. Beggs was in the bottom of the crate, surrounded by rotten human. Goo is the best way to describe it. She was rapidly decomposing into the goo herself, decay working its way up her body as she was absorbed into the putrid muck. Screams faded to silence as her lungs liquefied, sliding into the human stew. Both of us fell back, scurrying as far away from the crate as we could. The knocking started again, rapid, staccato booms from every direction. The banging was echoed by the crate top snapping back shut on its own, sitting like it was never moved. The knocking slowed, centering from every direction as it moved toward the chain doors. The force of it increased tenfold with every knock that joined the pounding rhythm, eventually bursting the doors open from the outside, chains whipping through the air and embedding in the wall across the warehouse. "What the hell did that?" Gray Eyes asked, looking from me to the door, quickly back and forth, Her piercing eyes were suddenly clouds of fear, something crawling through the doorway that was now open to the darkness outside. It didn't come in from the outside, though, all of it materializing in the threshold as it made its way out. Arms, mottled in gray with rot, made their way through, a legion of skulls all stemming from the same torso, bunched around each other in various states of decay. All looked like they had died in different ways, from some with burns to others with eyes scooped out and gunshot wounds visible on their heads. It finally dragged the remainder of its body through, scrawny legs scraping the ground behind it as it began moving slowly towards us. I was feeling nauseous again as a new wave of smells hit me. The rotting bodies mixed with the smell of burning flesh and smoke made me gag even more. "Run it around and get out the door," Gray Eyes said, holding an arm over her nose and studying the abomination in front of us. Every mouth on the thing was screaming now, even the ones that barely had mouths from injuries. I could see one gurgling, lower half of the skull totally missing, covered in blood from what looked like a shotgun wound. As it screamed, blood came flying out, spraying the floor ahead of it with sizzling drops of blood. "Don't get hit by that either. Jesus Christ." We both ran, going down the furthest end of the warehouse from the putrid mass as we could. It kept crawling towards us, picking up speed as it went. When we finally got it clear of the doors, both of us swept a wide arc, each going around a different side to hopefully try and confuse it, even if only briefly. I was able to reach the door first, hitting the threshold and bursting through, Gray Eyes right behind me. As she tried to leap out, the thing suddenly heaved itself forward, grabbing her with one long, rotten arm and holding her by the leg, dragging her away from the freedom in the dark night. "Help!" she screamed as I desperately grabbed at her, trying to pull her back toward the doorway. The abomination was digging fingernails into her leg now, drawing blood that seeped into its own skin instead of flowing down. It invigorated the monster, grabbing her other leg and fully pulling her back, making me hit the doorway and get knocked back on my butt on the concrete outside. I got up before I realized there were no screams. Rushing through the door, I saw why. There was nothing in there. It's like I ran into a totally different building. Lights off, dark rust on the rafters, and the window we were trying to climb through shattered into jagged edges. Gray Eyes was gone. No sign any of us were ever here in the layers of dust on the floor. Even in my shock at everything, I wasn't going to stick around this hell house. I got out of Dodge, though I was lost for a lot of the time until I found a major road. Lost count of how many cars passed by me until one finally stopped and took pity, right around the time dawn was beginning to brighten the horizon. I didn't even ask them for a ride, just to dial the police and tell them where we were. I think that spooked them a little, because they locked the doors and rolled the window up while they did it. Cops got there later. I gave them the name of the guy that I owed the debts to, telling them about the 5 of us being kidnapped and held there. I didn't mention what killed them, just that they had been murdered by the guards that brought us there. Police wouldn't have taken me seriously if I mentioned all of that anyway. The only good thing to come out of this is that I've effectively quit gambling altogether. I've taken up drinking a little since all I can see when I'm sober is that abomination. I hope Gray Eyes didn't suffer, because I can still hear her screams when I close my eyes. The smell of death hasn't left my nose, no matter how much bleach I take to my house. Hell, no matter what I use, it doesn't leave. I can't eat most of the time. I can barely sleep. But at least I'm not gambling, I guess. I'm about to start my senior year of college. Last semester, I took a job as a desk attendant at my school's library. It's a private university, so they get away with paying their workers below minimum wage, but I don't mind. So long as I make enough to be able to afford my gas, I'm in the clear. I commute about an hour back and forth from home to school every day of the week, so a little gas money goes a long way. The cool thing about the library job is that it doesn't require much from me. I sit at a desk and check books in and out, answer the occasional phone call, and help whenever needed. I have a lot of downtime and spend most of it reading or catching up on homework. Hours are a little sporadic though. My schedule usually looks something like this. Tuesday, 2 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Thursday, 4:30 p.m. to 10. The library closes at 10. I spend many of those hours doing nothing at all, really. Being in the library for so long with nothing to do, you begin to take notice of certain things. Like when the library is most active, and when there's no one in there at all. It's fairly active towards the start of my shift around 4:30, and dies down from about 5:30 to 7. From 7 to 9, there's usually a good deal of traffic in and out. More often than not, though, I spend that last hour from 9 to 10 completely alone there. Those nights when I'm there until close, I'm responsible for shutting the lights off and locking the room downstairs that houses the library's book collection. I'm never down there during the day. Most of the textbooks students need to check out are kept upstairs and are never more than a few steps away from my desk. Locking that room is the last thing I do before I go home for the night. I took this job because I wanted something on campus, where I could walk straight from class to work. The last thing I want to do is leave school and have to drive somewhere else to go do homework. So having that job right there on campus was ideal. It is incredibly mundane, but I get to see a lot of faces. It's nice to know that people on campus don't just see me as that weird guy in their economics class, but rather that guy in the library. Like I said, from about 9 to 10, it's pretty quiet in there. Most of the other lights in the building are usually already turned off before I even leave. One night when I went to lock up the room downstairs, I thought I heard something coming from one of the back corners. I called out, asking if anyone was down there, and when no one replied, I shut the lights off, waited a beat to see if someone yelled out, "Hey, I'm down here," or something. But when no one did, I locked the door and closed it behind me. I didn't dwell on it at all. In fact, I put the whole thing completely out of my mind almost immediately. I only remembered it again after what happened to me recently. Another great thing about this library job is that it continues into the summer. My friends hound me endlessly about staying on for the summer. "Why don't you just get a job in town?" they say. "Something that's not an hour away and pays better." I don't want a better job, though. I like working there. I like being on campus when no one else is. There's a strange feeling to it, but it's one I like. It makes me feel like a true staff member there, and not just some student worker. The job is different over the summer, though. Since there's no students coming in to check out books, there's really no need to just sit at the desk upstairs. Lots of other libraries request books from us, so the first part of my workday involves packaging up those books for shipment. It's a long, complicated process, and it usually takes most of the morning. Once that is done, however, the summer project has been to go down to the book collection and make sure all the books are still there. There's a huge list, all on an Excel spreadsheet, every book in the entire library, and my job is to go through and check every single one to make sure that it's there and cataloged properly. If a book isn't there, I type an X next to it in the Excel sheet and move on. Lots of books that are shelved aren't even on the list. Those books, I turn on to their spine and my boss comes through later and takes them out. I don't work alone though. There's another girl that works with me. We each take a section and start on either end, checking off books until we meet in the middle. Once we're done, we move on to the next section and start the process again. The collection is large enough that oftentimes starting on either end of one section means that she and I are several shelves away from one another. Summer hours are different too. I work from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Wednesdays and Fridays. I get Saturday through Monday off, which is pretty nice. One day, when work was about over, I came back upstairs from the collection and remarked casually to my boss that I found a book down there from the 1890s. She didn't seem as thrilled as me about the discovery. "Go wash your hands," she said. I was a little confused. "Why's that?" I asked. In books from before 1900, they used to use heavy metals like lead and mercury in the publishing process. I attended a conference a while back and they talked about that. I'm doing my best to take all of those books out and get rid of them. Go wash your hands. I went and washed my hands in the bathroom, and while I was in there, I couldn't help but realize the tragedy of what she had said. She was going to be getting rid of any old books she found. It's not that these books were all that interesting. Usually some old treatise on bird watching or something like that, but still, old books are cool, poisonous or not, and I hated to see them going into the dump. Most days down in the book collection, it's my boss, my one coworker, and myself. We often talk back and forth from across the room about strange books we find, calling out goofy titles and things of the like. I occasionally find an old book from the late 1800s and tell my boss. She snatches them up and puts them on her cart. I hate seeing that, so I have taken to just not telling her about them. Summertime temperatures are in full swing, so most days it's about 90 degrees or so outside. Problem is, it's about 60 degrees down in that book collection room. So I always have on a sweater or something over my t-shirt. When I step outside to go to lunch, it's always incredibly too hot for all the clothes I have on. But if I didn't have them, I'd freeze to death down in that book collection. When my boss told me that my coworker would be gone for the next 2 weeks, I didn't think much of it. It was an easy job, and all her absence meant was that it would just take a little longer to get through sections of books now. Lots of times I was down in that room by myself. My boss was often in her office or running various errands around campus. I always knew when she came back down there because I could hear her begin scanning books and putting them on her cart. Though I hardly ever saw her, I'd occasionally catch a glimpse of her between shelves of books. I always bring earbuds because without some kind of podcast or music playing, 4 hours or so in that collection would just drive me insane. I came into work the other day, 15 minutes late, 10 minutes later than usual, and noticed that my boss was not at her usual place behind her desk. I took my seat at my desk and saw a note stuck to the computer screen. "Good morning. I will be out of town today and tomorrow." Thursday and Friday. "If you run into any issues with loans or anything, don't worry about it. We will figure it out next week. Have a great weekend." Reading this note, I honestly breathed a sigh of relief. Now I could slack off and not feel bad about it. It's not that I hate this job, but it's not exactly easy to lock in and work when all you are doing is reading call numbers on books and putting a little check mark or an X on a spreadsheet. I did my best to get all the loans taken care of for that day and immediately took advantage of my boss's absence. Anytime I want a drink when I'm working, I have to walk to a separate building nearby where there is a vending machine. It takes roughly 5 or 6 minutes to get from the library to the vending machine and back. That building with the vending machine is one of the oldest still standing on campus. Even in broad daylight, it gives me the creeps. I got a drink and took the long way back to the library. I was probably gone for about 10 minutes. I went down to the book collection, put my headphones in, and picked up from where I left off the day before. I was at the very back of the library, the farthest corner from the door, but one of the overhead fluorescent lights is out, so it's oddly dark. Having just gotten back from that creepy old building, I was already somewhat spooked when I got back down to the book collection. Like I said, that room is always cold, but that day it felt even colder. I genuinely felt like my sweater and sweatpants were not enough to keep me warm. The longer I was down there, the more I wished I had a jacket or a thicker sweater or something. I made the mistake of listening to a creepy podcast that day. This was a podcast I always listened to while working down there, but today, all alone in that cold, poorly lit library, I realized that it was a mistake. I periodically took my headphones out because I swore I heard something. Each time I was proven to be incorrect, thankfully. I wondered for a while if the air conditioning in the building was broken or something. I couldn't think of any other reason that it was so cold in the book collection compared to the rest of the building, and especially outside. When I went out for lunch that day, I was genuinely shocked by the temperature discrepancy. I had to take my sweater off before I even got to my car. If you have ever been in a garage or an old basement in the winter, then you'd have a pretty good idea of what it felt like in that book collection. Getting back from lunch, I resumed my work, and yes, that same creepy podcast. As time ticked away down there, I suddenly got an overwhelming feeling that I was being watched. I couldn't see or hear anyone else down there, but I felt it strongly. I set my laptop down and walked around the room, checking every aisle of bookshelves. I looked through all of the windows to see if anyone might have been outside, but there was no one. I was still completely alone. I began to long for the workday to be over. I wanted to go home. I had gotten spooked, and at that point, there was no getting unspooked. I checked my phone and saw that it was 3 o'clock. I was relieved. Only 1 hour left. I went back to my work, but I soon became aware of some kind of sound. I pulled out one of my earbuds and listened. It was some kind of humming. I couldn't tell if it was from a machine or from a person. That collection room of the library contains a lot of doors that are always locked with little signs that say things like boiler room or mechanical room. I figured this humming, which I had not heard at all this summer, must be coming from one of those rooms, but even still, it didn't do my nerves any favors. I left my earbuds out, turned off my podcast, and decided to finish that last hour of work in silence. After all, I was getting sick of pulling an earbud out every 5 minutes or so to check for some strange sound. I heard a book fall. It was plain as day and unmistakable. Somewhere, several shelves away from me, a book just fell off a shelf and hit the floor. That's got to be a pretty common thing in libraries, though, right? I got up and looked for it. I saw it. It was one of those old books. It was so old that it wasn't even in English. I'm fairly certain that it was Latin. I picked up the book and put it back in place. I realized while reshelving it that it came from a very tightly packed shelf. I honestly had trouble squeezing it back into its place. Why would that book have fallen? It was almost like someone had tried to pick it off the shelf, dropped it, and ran away. But I knew that couldn't be what happened because I would have heard all of that. But I didn't. All I heard was the book hitting the floor. I checked my phone and saw that it was only 3:07. How had only 7 minutes passed? I decided that I was done anyway. I needed to get out of that room. I was freezing, and I was scared. I shut my laptop off and left. I hit the lights on my way out, and I know I heard another book fall before I closed the door, but I was not going to stick around to put it back. The whole drive home I thought of how ridiculous I was being. A book fell in a library. Big whoop. That's possibly the most normal thing that could happen in a library. I figured that I had just gotten spooked and had overreacted to everything. Fear has a way of heightening your senses. That must have been why I could hear every little noise in that library all day. I wondered if that humming I heard was something that is always going on, or something that kicks on periodically, and I just have never noticed it before. By the time I got back home, I was laughing at myself for how paranoid I had been. I woke up late the next day. It was raining. Rolls of thunder kept me from getting up. It was so nice, so peaceful. When I actually looked at my phone and saw the time, that cloud of serenity dissipated. I jumped out of bed and quickly got dressed, rushed to my car, and sped out of my driveway. Halfway to the school, I realized that there was no reason for all this. No one was there at work. When I arrived, I could be sure that I would be alone. A sinking feeling crept into my stomach at that realization. I thought of the day before. I was scared of my mind wandering again, elevating every little thing I heard or noticed. My fear was not of the library, but of what my own imagination would do to me while I was down there. I didn't want it to happen again. I figured the more I thought about it, the more my imagination would mess with me. So when I actually got into work, I put my earbuds in and turned on some music. Most of the other people that work on campus must have had the day off that day because it really felt like I was the only human being on the entire campus that day. It was so bad that I checked my schedule a few times just to make sure that I was in fact supposed to work that day. I was. There was no mistake there. There were other cars in the parking lots and some parked along the streets near the campus, but I really did not see anyone. I began the typical morning shtick, checking for loan requests and all that. There were none that day. That meant I had nothing more to do that day other than go down to that collection room and start checking books. The room loomed over my mind. My imagination had begun to have its way with it, but I quickly pulled myself back together. It's an old room in an old library. Of course it's going to be creepy. Of course the central air isn't going to work right down there. Books fall off of shelves. That just happens. It's fine. Get over it. I said to myself as I slowly crept down the stairs. I reached the final step and turned to look down the short hallway to the collection room door. It was still shut, just like I left it. I slowly walked over to it and opened the door. I had forgotten to shut one light off. There was a single fluorescent light panel, illuminating a small part of the collection room. It was closer to the back of the room, surrounded on all sides by darkness. Simple and explainable. But there was just something about it. The sound the light made, the darkness surrounding it, the dull yellowish nature of the light itself. My stomach sank immediately. I debated turning back right then, but instead chose to stay. I flicked the other light switches, and the rest of the lights came on. It wasn't so bad like that. The sinking feeling in my stomach went away. It was as cold down there as it ever was, though it felt colder as my clothes and hair had not yet dried from my rainy walk from my car to the library. The clouds were dark enough that not much natural light got through the windows of that room. This left the corners dark, and made the light feel unnatural. The upbeat music playing in my earbuds did only a passingly decent job at keeping my imagination from running wild. A few times, like the day before, I thought I heard something. At some point I remembered the book that had fallen before I closed up the day before. I wondered where that was, and went looking for it. As I walked between the shelves searching for the book, I never found it. I had heard a book fall, right? The sinking feeling came back a little bit. I returned to where I was, towards the backmost part of the room, wary and growing increasingly more nervous. I felt as though the room was getting incrementally colder as the day went on. At one point, I swear I saw my own breath. Suddenly, my hair stood on the back of my neck. I looked up from my laptop. I peeked through the shelves. Something was watching me, and I knew it. I pulled my earbuds out and held perfectly still. I heard that same humming that I had heard the day before. It seemed louder this time. I stepped away from my place in the shelves once again and began to walk down the aisles between the shelves. The humming didn't seem like it was coming from one of those locked storage closets. Honestly, it didn't seem to have any source or point of origin at all. I found a strange spot on the ceiling in one of the aisles. I think that it was near the same shelf where the book had fallen. The spot looked like mold to me. It was black, but not faded or soaked in like how a lot of mold looks. It was dark black and almost shiny. It looked like someone had bought a paint can from Lowe's or Home Depot, opened the lid, and thrown it up at the ceiling. I understand that it must be mold or something, but I just don't think I've seen anything like it before. Another thing about that huge black spot, it was cold. Just standing below it, I felt like I was in a meat freezer. Perhaps just above that spot was where the central air was broken. I really don't know how that even works. Like maybe a pipe or a tube was broken or ripped or something. Whatever it was, that explanation satisfied me enough. I walked back to the place where I was before and started working again. I found it incredibly hard to focus on my work. I wanted to leave. I was getting freaked out again, the same way I was yesterday. I was trying as hard as I could to keep my composure, not to become paranoid like I had before. I sat on a stool, staring straight ahead at the shelf of books in front of me. I wanted to ignore the feeling, but the longer I sat there, the harder it became. Someone, something, was looking at me. I could feel eyes on me. When I finally allowed the feeling to manifest fully, I felt paralyzed, as though whatever was looking at me could only sense motion or something. I heard a different sound, like the sound of something freezing or growing. It sounded like water soaking into a dry sponge. I seemed to perceive a dark shape hovering above me, but I couldn't bear to look up. I rationalized that a particularly dark rain cloud had passed close to the windows and blocked out even more of the sun. I heard a book fall again. I got up quickly. I grabbed my laptop and shut it, tucking it under my arm. I walked around until I found the book. It was that same old book that had fallen before. I knelt down to pick it up. As I stretched out my hand to pick up the book, I felt a hand touch my shoulder. The hair on my neck stood straight. My skin tightened around my muscles and became covered in goosebumps. Without turning around, I stood and began to run. I hit a sharp right turn at the end of that row of shelves, and another just a few shelves from that. Then I had a straight and clear path for the door. I could hear it, whatever it was. I heard footsteps behind me. Not running, but footsteps nonetheless. As I neared the door, I reached out to shut off the lights. I hit the switch, and just before shutting the door, I dared to turn and looked behind me. In the darkness, I thought I saw a shape. Something terrible, something tall. Its other qualities I could only speculate, though overall it appeared human-like. I slammed the door shut and ran out to my car. The moment the door slammed shut, I heard the thing scream. I will never forget that sound. I haven't gone back to work there. I've ignored the emails from my boss, which I started getting the week after the incident. After a few weeks, the emails from her stopped. I dreaded returning to school. I did all I could to avoid setting foot in that library. If I ever do have to be in there, I avoid the bottom floor, and even on the other floors I keep it brief. I figured I would get a chewing out from my boss if she ever saw me again. The first time I saw her, though, I did not see disdain or anger in her eyes. What I saw was understanding, trauma, as though she knew why I had left and never come back. We didn't talk, but rather shared this look of understanding. After this, I ventured to open the emails which she had sent me. I found in the first email confusion as to why I had not gone in to work that day. The next email from a day later had more anger to it. Then there was the third email. It simply said, "I understand." Towards the end of that fall semester, one cool October day, I arrived at school to find the library closed. I saw men in hazmat suits going in and out of the building. When I got glimpses inside, I could see plastic covering everything. They told the students that there was black mold discovered in the library, and that considerable efforts were required to clean up and dispose of the mold. They told us that the librarian had taken a job at another school and would not be returning. I never believed that, and the fact that the library never reopened only confirmed what I had thought. I've put as much detail into this as I could possibly remember, just in case anyone here has ever encountered anything similar. I've thought about it, and was wondering if black mold exposure causes hallucinations or something. I don't want to believe what I saw down there that day, but I'm haunted by the memories. Memories too vivid to pretend like they are from a dream, but maybe if someone else had a similar experience, or knows exactly what I was encountering down there, then perhaps I could feel some kind of closure about this whole thing. Her name was Annabelle. Her friends and I used to call her Belle. I sometimes called her Belly. To me it sounded cuter, but she didn't like it because it sounded like belly. We loved each other very much. We met in college and had been together ever since. We had similar interests, compatible personalities, and we were both amazing in bed. The only time I remember arguing with Belle was after her sister's wedding. I was drunk. That's when I gave up drinking. I'd rather never have another sip of alcohol than argue with my sweet Belle again. Of course, I couldn't admit that to her. Her love language was quality time, and she'd probably just leave me if I got too sentimental. On the contrary, I often had to pretend to be rude to her while simultaneously showing her I cared for her. For some reason it turned her on. I used to call it being nice in a rude kind of way. Last year I proposed to her. We were supposed to get married this autumn. Despite being very busy with preparations for the wedding, we managed to squeeze in a short holiday to one of the European capitals this summer. I won't tell you which, out of fear that somebody reading this might go over there, so look for the evil flowers. It was a wonderful trip at first. We went sightseeing, we visited all the tourist attractions, museums, cathedrals, palaces, and so on. But Belle and I liked to experience a little more of the cities we visited. We liked to hike through every city, from north to south and from east to west. On the other way around, it didn't really matter. We used to call it getting a feel for the city. One evening I was scrolling on my phone in our hotel room. Belle had already fallen asleep. We had been hiking around the city all day long. I saw on my recommended feed a video about interesting but lesser known places in the city we were visiting. It was a top 10 list style video. I decided to watch it. Most of the places mentioned in the video we had already visited, but the last item on the list was the catacombs. I didn't know this city had catacombs. From what I've seen in the video, they weren't as impressive or famous as those in Paris or Rome, but I thought they were still worth visiting, as both Belle and I had a fascination with the macabre. Worth it they were not. Nothing is worth risking your life over. Foolishly, I made sure the next day that on our city hike we would pass by the entrance to the catacombs. I wanted to surprise Belle. The entrance was underneath a small old church. The catacombs were dark and narrow and filled with human remains. The bones were behind bars, but some of them were pretty close to the bars. If you wanted, you could reach and touch them, which is exactly the kind of thing that Belle liked to do. Personally, I found touching the bones disrespectful to the deceased, and also kind of gross, but didn't bother me enough to try to stop her. Should have. Belle was super excited to see the catacombs. She poked every bone she could reach, whenever nobody was around or looking. I guess the thought of getting caught thrilled her. For some reason, the whole experience made her turned on. She grabbed my behind and whispered in my ear slowly and with passion in her voice, "I can't wait to get home." Needless to say, her words also put me in a mood for some boning, pardon the pun. "Ouch!" cried Belle. "What the heck was that?" She had pricked her finger. She took out her phone and turned on the torch. I took out mine as well and went to see. Thinking it was a bone or maybe wood splinter. Who knows what kind of germs are living down here? It might get infected. I thought out loud. No such luck. Out of the eye socket of one of the skulls poked out the weirdest flower I had ever seen. A very dark purple, almost black, iridescent flower. The stem, thorns, and leaves, however, were completely black, and I mean completely. I don't know if you've seen those videos on the internet about Vanta Black. A dye so black, it looks like a hole in reality. That's exactly how the stem and leaves looked, and not just in the darkness of the catacombs. I've had the misfortune to see the accursed things in broad daylight, and they are just as mind-bogglingly black. It was one of these impossibly black thorns that Belle pricked her finger. Short after our visit to the catacombs, Belle couldn't go any further. Despite only having walked less than a quarter of the distance of the previous day, she felt ill, was short of breath. I touched her arm, then her forehead. She ran a fever. We took a taxi to the hotel. Belle went straight to bed. I couldn't even get undressed, let alone shower. If only she took that shower or at least put on pajamas, we might have noticed the signs of the infection earlier. Or is it a parasite? Let's call it what it is. A curse. In the morning she couldn't get up. She was just too weak. That's when I noticed it. Something black like veins, or rather black roots underneath her skin on her arm. Panicked, I took her shirt off. She wasn't able to. The roots were going from her hand to her breast. Ugly, thick, and impossibly black, even beneath the skin. What was that thing? How was that possible? Is she going to die? It can't be normal. It can't be natural. I didn't dare think it then, but I'll say it now. It was supernatural. I started hyperventilating. I didn't know what to do. "Stop being a baby," said Belle with much difficulty. "Call ambulance." At the hospital, she went into a coma. The roots spread all around her torso and eventually down her legs. The first flower bud came out of her private parts. There the flesh was more tender and the flower could more easily get through. then out of her belly, arms and legs, and eventually from between her ribs. There wasn't much blood loss, because the flowers produced some sort of coagulant, the doctors said. It didn't want to let her die that easily. It wanted to produce as many flowers as possible first. We buried her last week. Maybe it's a good thing she was in a coma. Hopefully she didn't feel that much of the pain. Otherwise, it would have been excruciating. Hopefully, I won't feel much pain either. I woke up this morning, more like afternoon, unable to get out of bed. I mustered enough strength to take off my pajamas. I have a black root going from my belly button down my left leg. I don't know where to start. I live on my family's 250-acre property. Being a farm, it's pretty open with rolling fields surrounding my home, except to the left of my house where there's a small 2-acre woods. It took me a while to check it out, even though growing up I was always running through the woods wherever we lived. Since this particular woods, so thick I never spent much time in it. But one day I decided to explore. I grabbed a machete, knowing it would be a slow trek cutting down various plants and vines out of my way. I had made a complete circle around the outside of the woods instead of going through the center, which was full of vines and poison ivy. I had almost made it back to my starting point until I was stopped in my tracks. Sitting in front of me in a small clearing was an old, dirty mattress. I remember audibly saying, "What the?" when I got close enough to see. Even worse, next to the mattress were two things, an old stuffed rabbit doll and a bowl of water. Well, it obviously creeped me out being in the woods alone, with nothing but a now dull machete from hacking down various plants. Eventually my curiosity got the better of me. I got closer and closer, almost chuckling at my reaction to what, albeit creepy, looked abandoned. Still, something seemed off, and I could feel a pit growing in my stomach. That's when I looked up. I had been so focused on the mattress itself that I didn't even notice it was pointed directly towards my house. The woods in front of the mattress had been lightly trimmed, not enough to notice any difference against the thick backdrop of the woods, but just enough to see my home. I was feeling uneasy and decided it best not to dwell on it too long. Probably just a spot some teenagers used to hang out on an old mattress, I thought to myself. No doubt trying to ignore the multitude of questions flowing through my mind. Why would someone clear the weeds to have a direct view of my house? Why wouldn't someone throw the mattress away? Why put it in the woods right off the edge? All these questions were an obvious distraction to the thought that was slowly growing on my subconscious. Is someone watching me? By the time I got back to my house, I was almost laughing at myself for the stupidity of it. You really think you're interesting enough for someone to watch you? What are the chances someone is actually watching me? Eventually, the mattress fully left my mind while I got distracted watching TV. Still, I never felt completely comfortable knowing there that old, dirty mattress was just sitting in the woods next to my home. Every day when I got home from work, I would look towards the woods in passing, and each time I passed by, I got an almost uneasy feeling. Being on a farm in the middle of nowhere, it's almost pitch black at night except for the light on my front porch that was turned on by a motion sensor that you had to get pretty close to for it to turn on. One night, while getting home from work pretty late, I got out of my truck and grabbed my keys to lock it. That's when I saw it. As my headlights illuminated the woods in front of me for a split second, two dots reflected back towards me. They almost looked like eyes, but were too big and spread out to be a person's eyes, and I convinced myself that I had been seeing things. When I tried clicking the lock button again, my headlights illuminated the woods once more and I saw something. I went inside feeling a little better, letting the thought slowly float away from my mind. If only I had known what I know now, maybe I wouldn't have been so calm. I should have called the cops, but can you blame me? If there really was someone there, they would have no doubt been gone the moment they saw a cop car pull up, and all that would have been found was an old mattress in the woods. Well, certainly creepy. I doubt the police would have given any serious thought to it. I should have done something. Anything. Because no matter how much I tried, I still couldn't get the idea out of my head. Someone was watching me from the woods, but I would never be able to confirm it. The moment I would go to investigate, the person could have run upon seeing me coming. I wish I would have thought of something, but I tried my best to just ignore it. A few months passed by, and the idea that someone was watching me had escaped my mind. At some point, my friend Ryan, who had been living with me, decided to make a dirt bike track through the woods. I showed him the mattress one day while we were walking through the woods and he just laughed. For one reason or another, Ryan didn't share the same feelings I had towards the mattress. We grabbed an old machine from the barn with a bucket on the front and lifted the mattress into it. We took it back to the barn and threw it away in the dumpster. I remember a feeling of relief when we left it in the dumpster. Ryan slowly worked on the track, going back and forth from the machine to his dirt bike, tweaking every turn, jump, and straightaway until, after a few months, he had finished what actually turned out to be a pretty nice and fun track. Running through the woods, it had a few twists and turns, going around trees and clearings he had made with the old tractor. Hearing him ride around on his bike, and the sound of an old diesel engine starting up, had grown so familiar to me on the weekends that I would almost forget the sounds were even happening. God, how I miss those sounds. Hey, I'm gonna go work on the track. I think I'm almost finished with it. It's going to be awesome, Ryan said on another Saturday morning. I had gotten so used to him disappearing into the woods weekend after weekend that it had almost become second nature. So much so that I didn't even notice as the time rolled around to 11 p.m. that day. I hadn't seen Ryan in a while. I didn't even realize that the noise I had been so accustomed to over the last few weeks was also missing. I stepped outside to a silent, chilly night to check on where Ryan had gone. His truck was still parked next to the house, as were mine and my girlfriend's vehicles. The old tractor was sitting behind the house, just in front of the opening that led into the woods following the track. It looked like a deep, dark abyss with the faint light I could see coming off the moon. I knew going in there alone at this time of night was the last thing I was going to do, so I resorted to every other option I could think of. I checked the barn where we kept the old tractors and found nothing but a calm breeze and crickets in the night singing. I checked the other houses that were on the property for the people who worked on the farm, hoping he had maybe gone over to one of them. Still, I found no sign of Ryan or his dirt bike. I tried calling his phone a few more times before giving up. After hearing his voicemail one last time, I knew there was only one thing left to do. So I grabbed the only flashlight I could find, one of those old-style bulb flashlights that was barely bright and made everything have a yellow tint to it. After taking a few more deep breaths and desperately trying to think of any other possible place he could be, I finally made my way towards the deep, dark, almost tunnel-like opening that led into the woods. I walked around the entire layout of the track for what felt like an eternity, even though it had only been 45 minutes. I almost started to feel relieved that I could walk out of this dark, seemingly endless forest and think of another place to find him. Still, I had to look one last time. As I rounded the third pin turn, something caught my eye. Just past the turn, lying on its side in the weeds, I saw something that looked like plastic and was red in color. My heart dropped when all the ideas ran through my head. What if he's out there hurt? What if he had been waiting for me for hours with various broken bones? Or worse, what if it was too late? What if one of my best friends died because I was too scared to go out into a small patch of woods right next to the safety of my own home? I pushed the thoughts out of my head while starting to move closer to the bike, hoping I'd find a possibly injured but at least alive friend. What I found, in a weird way, was so much worse. Laying down on its side was Ryan's dirt bike, with the same stickers that he had put all over it, but no Ryan. I searched everywhere I could, hoping he had maybe tried to crawl back to the house, but I couldn't find a single sign of him. Not in the woods, not near my home, not anywhere. It was almost like he had vanished. Against my better judgment, I went back into the woods hoping to find some sort of clue, and while I somewhat found what I was looking for, it didn't make me feel any better or answer the biggest question going through my mind. Where are you, Ryan? As I got closer to the bike, it looked seemingly normal. It was dirty, but that was to be expected on something with dirt in the name. I tried my best not to move it while searching for clues. I was looking closely at the side facing the ground when I noticed something. Sticking out of the back tire was a small piece of metal. I soon realized it was a nail sticking out of the tire, something that wasn't unusual on a farm, but then I kept looking. There were maybe 15 or 20 nails all along the back tire. Far too many for it to be a coincidence. I checked the front tire and found the same 20 or so nails sticking out from it also. Obviously something had happened here, but I wasn't going to be the one to find out what. So I ran out of the woods as fast as I could before calling 911. The police showed up maybe 15 minutes later. That was one positive to living in a small town. The police were never too far away. The cops searched the woods, brought out canine units and everything, but they couldn't find a single sign of Ryan anywhere. We'll open a missing persons investigation in the morning, but for now, try to get some sleep. We'll find your friend soon. I'm sure of it, said Officer Langley. The first cop to show up on the scene and the last one to leave. His words were almost comforting in a way, like we might actually find Ryan wherever he may be. A few months had passed, and Ryan was still missing. The police search was slowly fading out of anyone's mind, and I felt Ryan may soon join all the other missing people who were never found. Every few weeks in the bright sunshine Florida is known for, I would walk around the track. It was almost meditation for me. Maybe I thought I might find something that would lead me to Ryan or where he went, but that never happened. By this time, the track had slightly overgrown with fresh green weeds, except for the small trail I would leave behind me walking around those woods. I missed Ryan, but knew I couldn't dwell on it forever. In the back of my mind, I thought I would never know what really happened that day, until I saw it, laying in those woods on the ground, just off what now resembled a walking trail, was that old, dirty mattress. The feeling I got this time was almost revolting. I know we threw that mattress away. How could it possibly be there in the woods? Why did it take so long for it to show back up? By now, it should be 10 feet deep, buried under piles of garbage. I don't know what to do. I just had to sit down and write everything down the best I could remember it all. I don't know if I'll ever post this, but I can't get this uneasy feeling out of my stomach no matter what I try. P.S. I wrote this a few weeks ago. I never thought it would see the light of day, but things have gotten much worse. I can't explain it right now, but I knew that before I explained what is happening right now, I need to give some backstory. I'll update as soon as I can. Many people are afraid of spiders or heights. My phobia is fairly common as well, you see. I am afraid of clowns. When I say I'm afraid of clowns, I really mean it. I can barely even look at the most benevolent clown for more than 10 minutes without screaming and crying. Trying to watch any killer clown horror movie would probably cause my premature death. That being said, I'll tell you about the time that I tried confronting my fear. I doubt telling you this story will help me get over my fear of clowns. However, it might make you afraid of them, so don't continue reading if you don't want another phobia in your life. The story goes as follows. A couple of months ago, I was enjoying the weekend with a friend in his house. Only he and his cat live there, so his house is pretty much the perfect hangout place. We were playing video games while my friend's cat was curled up in my lap. Usually, cats hate me, but Bob always had a soft spot for me. He loves to follow me around everywhere I go. He especially loves when I use his fuzzy back as an armrest. After a couple of hours, we decided to buy some whiskey and Coke from the nearby supermarket. We quickly exited the house and walked towards the supermarket, which was only around 3 minutes away. Unfortunately, our trip wasn't as simple as I originally anticipated. Standing right next to the supermarket, we saw the one thing that makes my blood run cold. A clown. A panic attack hit me as soon as I saw the clown. Even though every clown creeps me out, there was just something about this one that made me extremely uncomfortable. He looked like a Ronald McDonald copy, although a very bad copy. The clown was sickly slim and short. His costume had many rips and tears. The makeup on his face was horribly done. It was so awful that his face looked like someone threw a couple of buckets of random paint on it. Even though the clown's appearance alone was frightening enough to ruin my day, what scared me the most was the way he looked at me. Even from a distance, I could tell he was staring straight into my eyes. He was smiling so hard that it looked like the skin on his face will get ripped off by his unnatural smile. Worst of all, he wouldn't stop smiling at all. His smile seemed to widen with every passing second. At this point, I was completely frozen in place. My friend tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Let's just go and grab the drinks. You don't have to look at that weirdo." I somehow powered through my panic attack and said, "Sure, but I'm gonna stare at the guy. Can't be a coward forever. It's about time I tried doing something about my problem." My friend gave me a reassuring look and replied with a simple, "All right." Another, even more potent panic attack hit me as soon as I took only 2 steps towards the clown. I started crying. Embarrassed, I barely mustered the strength to tell my friend that I'm going back to the apartment. I speed-walked back to the house. I collapsed on the couch in tears as soon as I entered. Bob rushed to cheer me up by jumping on top of my back and purring. It didn't take more than 30 minutes for my friend to return. He was proudly carrying 2 bags full of drinks and snacks like they were trophies. He put the bags on the nearby table, then cheerily, he started talking. "You know, that clown wasn't that bad. One guy gave him some money and then he..." Before he finished his sentence, annoyed and exhausted, I said, "Please, let's just drink. I don't want to hear about it." He nodded understandingly and went to grab the whiskey glasses. Hours passed. After some time of heavy drinking, we fell asleep on the couch. It wasn't an enjoyable nap for me, because a nightmare involving the supermarket clown, which I would rather not describe, woke me up. I groggily went to the spare bedroom, but before going to bed, I realized that neither of us locked the front door. Who knows how long we were asleep? It's not like this is a crime-free neighborhood. anyone could have entered the house. I walked as fast as I could towards the front door. I checked it, and as expected, it wasn't locked. So I immediately locked it. I reassured myself that no intruder entered the house. Then I went to bed. While laying in bed, morbid thoughts started attacking my mind. What if someone entered the house? What if the clown we saw earlier followed my friend home and is waiting for the opportunity to surprise me? The sequence of disturbing thoughts was instantly stopped by the sound of soft meowing. I was shocked to hear meowing coming from under my bed, but that shock was immediately replaced by a feeling of relief. Even though Bob was just a cat, knowing he's here to protect me while I try to sleep was oddly putting my mind to rest. After some time of rolling around in bed, I finally fell asleep to the sounds of soft meowing and purring. I woke up early next morning. Considering my paranoia from last night, the sleep itself wasn't that bad. I found my friend playing with Bob in the living room. I immediately told him, "Bob's a real lifesaver. If it wasn't for him, it would have been near impossible for me to get some sleep last night." He looked at me in confusion and asked, "What you mean?" "Bob was keeping me company. He slept under my bed last night," I said with a smile. "Nah, he was here with me. He slept right next to the couch." My friend immediately rebutted. "I heard him meowing in my room," I responded. "I know Bob thinks you're cool and all, but he always sleeps next to me. It's like a ritual of ours, you see." He stopped mid-sentence. His calm demeanor was rapidly substituted by absolute fear. "Please, just trust me. Follow me and don't ask any questions until we're out of the house," he said with an unusual shakiness in his voice. He picked up Bob and ran towards the front door. I followed him as he hastily unlocked it. He barely gave me enough time to put on my shoes before pushing me out of the house, and then immediately locked the door behind us. He rummaged through his pockets trying to find his phone. He quickly realized he left it inside the house. So, he turned towards me and said with noticeable urgency in his voice, "Give me your phone. We have to call the police." I gave him the phone, but before he could use it, I asked him, "Can you at least tell me what's going on?" "You really don't want to know." He brushed me off. I snatched the phone out of his hand. With visible annoyance on my face, I said, "I do want to know. I'm not giving you my phone before you tell me why you're acting like a mental patient." "Fine, I'll tell you. But please stay as calm as you can," he told me before taking a deep breath. "Yesterday, you cut me off before I could tell you why I didn't think the clown was so bad, you see. Some guy gave him some money, then the clown gave the guy some cards with pictures of animals on them. As soon as the guy picked up the card he wanted, the clown would mimic the animal that was on the card. He imitated a frog, then a dog. The croaks and barks were exactly like the real thing. If I closed my eyes, I wouldn't notice that a human being is making those sounds." "Yeah, so?" I asked, very confused about his story. "Well, he could also do a cat impression," he said, with a defeated look on his face. I watched a woman drown and did nothing. I know that makes me basically a murderer and definitely a coward. Well, karma got me. A few weeks ago, I ended up in the ER for severe dehydration. I nearly died. I didn't run a marathon, wasn't trapped in the desert. I was sitting on my front porch. My neighbor was the one who found me. I wish he hadn't. How did I get here in the first place? It all started 3 months ago. I'm half Korean on my father's side. He died from lung cancer right before his 60th birthday, and shortly after my 30th. After his funeral, I decided I would explore my roots. So I took a lone trip to Korea. I didn't speak a single word of Korean, but I had a translator on my phone. Plus, a lot of people know English. I figured I was all good, right? Wrong. It was a lonely trip, and turns out not knowing the language was a lot harder to navigate than I thought. On my last night, I was eating bulgogi at a restaurant alone. My eyes were watering. It was too spicy, even though I asked for no spice. A few girls who looked around my age giggled and watched as I tried to finish my meal. I coughed and drowned a glass of soju. One of the girls came over and teased, "Too spicy?" I wiped my mouth with a napkin and smiled, glad to hear that she spoke English. Her name was Hana. One thing led to another, and I found myself at a house party with Hana and her friends. Over a dozen people squished in a tiny apartment in Seoul. They spoke in Korean most of the time. I couldn't keep up with my translator, so I just sat and nodded, pretending to understand. Hana gave me a pill. "Make you happy, not lonely and sad," she insisted. Screw it. I swallowed the pill down with my beer. She was right. It did make me happy. Suddenly I felt like I could understand every word that was being said. We laughed and drank and partied all night long. Then at some point ghost stories came up. Some guy warned me about Malguishan, water ghost, and the vibe shifted. This guy seemed serious. Everyone suddenly seemed serious. In Korean folklore, Malguishan are spirits of people who've drowned and now they're trapped in the water. They cry out for help, acting like they're drowning, and when you go in to help them, they pull you under, drowning you, and you take their place. You better watch out. His face was stone. No one said anything. I thought maybe someone would laugh, but no one ever did. The night was over. Hana said she'd walk me home. We walked alongside the Han River. There were lights reflected on the water from the Banpo Bridge, which is known for having this awesome rainbow fountain. Look it up. It's beautiful. It was super quiet. Not a lot of people out, which was surprising. Sure, it was 2 a.m, but I guess I just expected more people. About a block from my hotel, Hana said she had to pee really bad and dipped into a 24/7 mart. I waited outside. And that's when I heard it. Something near the river. It sounded like someone yelling. I went to look. I was shocked to see a woman screaming and thrashing in the river. She was drowning. And all I did was stand there and watch, frozen. It all happened so fast. Too fast for me to do anything. That's what I told myself again and again. But deep down I know that's a lie. I could have helped, but I was too scared. Too scared of Malguishan. The woman struggled a while longer, then disappeared under the water. Why didn't I yell for help? I ask myself that question all the time. I don't have an answer. Her body floated to the surface, and still I just stood and stared. Then a voice yelled out. It was Hana. She ran past me, into the water, and pulled the woman out. She tried to save her, but it was too late. I'll never forget what that woman looked like. Her mouth was hanging open, and her eyes were wide, and I don't know, she seemed horrified and disappointed. She was looking right at me. I left Korea in a panic, never saw or spoke to Hana again. I didn't look up any news articles or anything like that about the drowning. I didn't want to know about the victim. I wanted it all to go away, but it didn't. One day I was on my lunch break sitting in the park. Then I heard a sound coming from the fountain. It sounded like someone crying out for help. My blood ran cold. I went to the fountain, and no one was there. I figured I must be losing my mind. Nothing some drugs couldn't fix, right? My doctor put me on 10 milligrams of Lexapro. She said we'd start with 10, then go to 20 if I needed it. Well, the 10 didn't help, and neither did the 20, and neither did anything else. I started to hear that woman's cries every time I took a shower, coming from the drain, so I stopped taking showers and baths. I got fired from work when coworkers started complaining about the smell. Whenever I turned on the faucet, I heard her cries again. I couldn't drink a glass of water without hearing her, so I started buying bottled water. But then when I opened the bottles, I could hear her down inside the bottle. When it rained, it was the worst. During a storm, the wind sounded like her howls. The rain beating against the windows sounded like her arms smacking the water. Wherever there was water, she was there crying out for help. Then she was there in all liquid, milk, juice, all of it. When I opened a can of soda, it hissed and sounded exactly like the air leaving her lungs that night. I stopped drinking altogether. No water, no liquids, nothing, ever. In the ER, they gave me an IV. I could hear her in the bag. I ripped the IV out of my arm and ran. Now I'm back home. I can't take it anymore. Can't go on like this. So this is the last thing I'll ever write. My confession. I wrote it before I grabbed the knife. I'm sitting here now, waiting to die. Slit my wrists wide open, and I swear I can hear her in my blood. Update? I'm alive. I don't know how or why. I'm back at the hospital, and it's storming outside. I never wanted a roommate, but after my girlfriend Emily moved out unexpectedly, I couldn't afford the rent on my own. So when I saw the ad, female seeking quiet, respectful roommate, private room, cheap rent, I didn't hesitate. The price was too good to pass up. The next day, I met her. Anna was quiet and reserved, but something about her seemed off. She never made much eye contact, and her voice was barely above a whisper. Still, I figured it was none of my business. As long as she paid her share and didn't bother me, I could live with it. The first night in the apartment was quiet. Too quiet. I could hear every creak in the old building, every gust of wind rattling the windows, but Anna was nowhere to be seen. Her bedroom door stayed shut, and I never heard her move around. By the second week, strange things started happening. At first, it was small. Items misplaced, lights flickering. Then I started noticing odd sounds, like someone walking slowly in the hallway. I assumed it was Anna, though I rarely saw her. She was either always out or hiding in her room. One night, I woke up to the sound of faint whispering. It was coming from the hallway. I got up, heart racing, and opened my door. The hallway was empty, but the whispers didn't stop. They were coming from Anna's room. "Anna?" I called, but no response. I knocked on her door. The whispering stopped. Something about the sudden silence chilled me. I decided to leave it alone and go back to bed, convincing myself it was just my imagination. A few nights later, I came home late and found her standing in the kitchen, staring at the wall. She didn't move, didn't acknowledge me. I cleared my throat, trying to break the tension. "Hey, Anna, everything okay?" Slowly, she turned to face me. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, her face pale like she hadn't seen the sun in days. She didn't say anything, just stood there watching. It sent a shiver down my spine. "Anna?" I asked again, more forcefully. She blinked, finally breaking her eerie stare, then without a word turned and walked away, disappeared into her room. I didn't sleep that night. Things escalated quickly after that. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to find my door open, though I was sure I'd locked it. Footsteps echoed outside my room, pacing up and down the hallway. The whispering returned louder this time, almost like chanting. I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I had to confront her. The next morning I knocked on her door, more insistent this time. No answer. I tried again. Nothing. Finally, I turned the knob. It was unlocked. The room was empty. No bed, no furniture, no clothes. It looked like no one had ever lived there. My heart pounded in my chest as I stepped inside, trying to make sense of it. That's when I saw it. On the wall, carved deep into the plaster, was a single word. Emily. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my ex, Emily. I need to tell you something. Stay away from Anna. I stared at the message, my hands shaking. How did she know about Anna? Before I could respond, another text came through. She's not real. Suddenly the whispering returned louder than ever, surrounding me from all directions. I stumbled back, tripping over my feet as the door slammed shut behind me. And then a voice, Anna's voice, but twisted, distorted, filled the room. You should have left when she did. The lights flickered, and I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck. I turned, but there was no one there. Just the empty room and the whispering echoing in my ears. I bolted for the door, yanking it open and running out of the apartment. I never looked back. The next day, I broke the lease and moved out. I tried calling Emily, but her number was disconnected. To this day, I don't know who or what Anna was, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear the whispers.